First off, Connor Kelly, you had a great line. I changed it. I made it a Tony Ferguson joke, sent it out on Twitter. Told you, thank you for the line. You told me we're square if I steal the line as long as I give you a shout out. Boom, there's your shout out. We're even. Now, let's get into some fan questions. First one.
Hey, Chael. My name's Riley. I got a quick question for you about cardio. Who do you think has the best conditioning in the sport? I would think the argument's between Colby Covington and Tony Ferguson. Personally, I'd probably lean Ferguson just because he's such a psycho. And you hear these stories about his training and stuff, but Covington's is very impressive too. And if you think it's somebody else, I'd love to hear it.
All right, the best cardio in the sport. So, a little bit of a long answer, but the first guy to weaponize cardio and make it famous was a guy named Dan Gable. And Dan Gable was an Olympic champion in 1972. He went on to be the most successful coach that the NCAA had ever known for amateur wrestling. He did that out with the Iowa Hawkeyes. And he just had a huge belief that no matter what you're doing, if you can just keep doing it and do it harder than your opponent can defend, you will have success. This was his motto and his philosophy. And he was the first. Now, he's right. That works on all sports. So it's a very fair question of who has the best cardio, because that's a real thing that you have to deal with. So many times you'll talk about, well, who has the best boxing? Who has the best wrestling? Who has the best jiu-jitsu? All of those things matter, but all of those things are also very easy to see. The cardio is one of these intangibles that is harder to see, but it still exists. And the guy who first weaponized that in mixed martial arts, I believe, was George St. Pierre. Now, Randy Couture had also done a very good job with it, but I felt like George St. Pierre was a guy who would break opponents. He would make them wilt. He could come out in the 24th minute as hard as he came in the very first minute. But I do agree with you that as much as Dan Gable stood out for 30 years for something he did in 1972, the way that George St. Pierre stood out from 2002 to 2017, I agree with you that now there's multiple guys that can do it. I like your argument about Colby Covington. I like that suggestion. I think he does have a very good pace. I think that Max Holloway has an incredible output, which is also pace. One that you left out, Tony Ferg's a fine example. One that you left out was Khabib. That surprised me that you left Khabib out. He seems to me like a guy who's on you non-stop. I think those are all very good picks. And you want to know who else does that, but you don't see it as much because he doesn't go 5 rounds very much. But you want to know who else has one hell of a pace is Stipe. And if you remember in the Fedor days, when Fedor was king of the world, that was the one thing that he did so well. He could just go hard. Fedor loved the feeling of being exhausted. I'm quoting Fedor. But that's not something that you will hear very many humans of any walk of life ever say. That is a very rare thing. Dan Gable, to go back to him, but he is the one that created this whole thing, was the same way. He loved to be exhausted. So, good observation by you. I like your picks. I like your picks a lot. I think Colby's a great pick. I think that Ferg is a great pick. I was just surprised that you left out Khabib, and I don't know that I could narrow it down to one, but I think we're on the right track.
What do you think's next for guys such as like Brian Ortega, who had a ton of steam heading into the title fight, lost against Holloway in a great fight, showed a good performance, but following that they seem to have lost a little bit of marketing in terms of pushing him. What's next for guys like him who are real marketable and talented, but just not quite at the top?
Yeah, so Brian Ortega, that's a good question, right? Because, to answer your question, I believe it's Korean Zombie. I just read that. I think Korean Zombie even called him out. And Ortega answered and said, yeah, let's do it. Make it a main event somewhere. I want 5 rounds. I could have the quotes. Maybe Zombie said that. Maybe Ortega called it. But all of that was said between those two. So, I mean, generally when you get 2 studs like that to call each other out and the fans like it, boom. You just did the matchmaker's job for them. They sign off and off you go. So I guess if you're asking me to choose a direction or make a guess, that's what it would be. Ortega concerns me in some ways. And I could very much be wrong. I'm aware of that, but we're just a couple of guys over here talking. Let me tell you what my concern is. When you come in as great as he did, and Ortega was great. Ortega wasn't just a good fight. Ortega's a great, which is what led him to a world silver medal. Second baddest dude alive. He's pretty great. One thing that happens, though, when you get that rise that quickly is sometimes that becomes a springboard and you want more and it makes you hungrier. And sometimes you're happy to rest on your laurels and talk about, boy, I had a great rise and I main evented shows and I fought for titles. I don't know what side of the fence he sits on. I trust that Ortega will use that as a springboard. But to your point, because we haven't seen him in there and seen him active and seen him get right back on that horse, it does make you wonder, right? It does make you wonder just a little bit. When you have a guy like Max, who was Ortega's last fight, and Max has fought twice since that fight, and Ortega hasn't fought at all. Ortega could have been dealing with an injury. There could be something here that I'm leaving out of the story. I'm just saying it brings up a concern for me. Is he in the room? Is he working? Is he preparing? Is he training? Or is he just enjoying the newfound success? And he's got every right to do that. But from a competitive standpoint, I think that his next fight is very relevant. And he doesn't even have to get a win. When you're fighting the best guys in the world, particularly at that weight class, which is the hardest weight class in the world, I'm only talking about the performance. Is he going to go out there and perform? Is he going to be in shape? Is he going to be fit? Is his timing going to be there? And the reason that comes up is because, is he still in the gym? Is he still working and training? I trust that he is, but I don't think I'm wrong for asking that question.
Hey, what up, Chael? It's your boy, Tager. I love watching you fight, but I love your words even more, man. I was wondering what you think of Crone Gracie's fight in October against Cub Swanson, and if you think Crone will ever be a champion in the UFC. Appreciate it.
First off, you got a cool name. Second off, yeah, Crone. So here's mainly what I know about Crone. I had grappled with Crone a little bit, and I don't mean against each other. We were both in Metamoris together at the same time, and I saw him in the back, and I mainly know Crone through reputation. And guys that work out with him say he works his ass off. They say he's constantly working to evolve, that he naturally came in with an excellent guard, but that he understands how important it is to be on top. He understands how important it is to have that conditioning, but also be able to strike and close distance. And they say he works very hard. When you ask, could he be a champion? Sure. I don't know enough about him, in fairness, to go, yes, I predict him to be a champ. I don't know enough about him. But I know he's a winner. I know he comes from a family of winners. I know he expects to win. I think those are all really good signs. And then you've got a lot of other fate that goes into it, too. You've got a lot of luck that goes into. People don't like to talk about luck, but anytime you're dealing with politics of a sport where there's not a competitive architecture in place, and you got to get somebody to sign off and put your name on a contract opposite the guy who happens to have the time, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. A little luck comes into play. Are his skills of that of a world champion today? No. That still doesn't mean he couldn't win it. He's got some tricks that could catch anybody in the world, and if he does continue to evolve the way that his workout partners claim that his work ethic matches, I certainly wouldn't put a cap on him.
Hey, Chael. The moment Nate Diaz called out George Masvidal, I think every fan was salivating at their mouth, hardcore and casual. I'm wondering if in the news, George saying he wants to fight, he just wants paid. Nate wants to fight, he just wants paid, and rightfully so. Dana, of course, is saying negotiations are going nowhere, meaning he doesn't want to pay. What and why hasn't this fight been made, and what does it take to get the fight done? Because I want to see it, and I'm pretty sure every other person does, and I would definitely pay for a pay-per-view for this if they were headlined for 5 rounds. I want 5 rounds of that madness. So,
all right, look, this is a little bit more tricky of a topic than it may appear, and I agree with you. We want that fight. And I agree with you, that was the right fight. And I agree with you, we had a focal group known as 12,000 people and a live audience that jumped to their feet and went crazy for that fight. Okay, we get it. It's a big fight. It does get a little bit tricky when you're the promoter and you are now a businessman and you have contracts with athletes that if they have a terrible night, you will honor that contract. If they do not bring in enough eyeballs to cover the spread of the deal that you made, you are going to hand them that check anyway and take it in the ass. That's business, and that's the way it goes. It's very tough in these situations when you do finally have a fight where you're going to get a return on your investment on a contract that you took a gamble on. And now it looks like, wow, this is really going to pay off, and I'm going to see some opportunity here. And then you give that away back in a purse because the guys convince you that it's a really big fight and you can do that. You could just come in and renegotiate. But that becomes a very slippery slope. It becomes a slippery slope where you want to deal and do business with guys who have integrity and go, look, we already have a deal. This is the guy you want to fight. It's a big fight. What does that mean? For you, what that means is there will be a lot of media and a lot of opportunity. And you can then springboard that into something else, moving you up the ladder, moving you up the card and closer to the title. Oh, and by the way, when your contract's up, whenever that is, 1 fight from now, 5 fights from now, whenever that is, if momentum is still going your way, we're going to sit down, we're having a talk, and you're going to like how that talk goes. But until then, we have a deal, and I need you to honor the deal. That isn't a hard and fast rule. There is times you can bring a guy in and go, look, great job. You've outperformed this contract. You've got something very special in front of you. And I'm certainly not going to run away with all of it. I want to spread it around, same as I always do. There is room for that. But these are the two worlds that are colliding. And you got to make sure that you do that right. You got to make sure that you handle and play that correctly. I mean, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility as a businessman to do your best job with that, to make sure that you do balance that. So I think that that's part of the problem. I think it's an exciting spot. I think these guys are going to like the way that this turns out. But I also think that they need to understand there's going to be some responsibility, some realness, some reasonableness, and ultimately they do need to look at their contracts. It appears that they already have a deal to do a fight, and I think that that's at least the discussion and potentially the holdup.
Hi, Mr. Sonnen. Greetings from Germany. So my question is about longevity. We hear about those studies a lot now that talk about how not only direct punches to the head, but also judo throws or milder forms of impact can have a long-lasting effect on your brain health. And I would like to hear your take on that. Do you think that's overblown? And how much should a fighter or regular martial arts practitioner, how worried should they be about those issues? Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, so the way I'm interpreting that question is CTE and what are my thoughts on it. And I will tell you, I'm no different than anybody else. For a number of years, I thought this was all a made-up thing. For a number of years, I thought that was something said by guys that weren't tough enough to do it. We are now confronted with absolute evidence, scientific evidence. This is a real thing and that this is a very real problem. So I don't want to at all make believe to you that I have the answers. I will just tell you how I handled it for myself, athletes that I work with, what I will do to protect them. And the first thing is I'm a believer in headgear. It just logically makes sense to me that you would put a helmet around your head. We call it headgear. You'd have an extra layer of protection. It seems to me when you're in sparring, you should be doing just that, which is sparring. I know guys that fight. They put on the appropriate gear and the bigger gloves and then they go fight. That works that's just not how I do it. That's not something I believed in. That's not what my teammates did. That's not what guys that I work with, that's not what I want to see them do. I want to see them spar. And then when you get out there actually on Saturday night and the lights are on 3 times a year, yes, it's going to be different. You're not going to have those levels of protection. It's going to be different. But that also seems a lot more reasonable, at least logically, that you could sustain that for a longer period without having some of the same concerns of the CTE that you're speaking to. Use football by example, and I think you had brought up football. But those are mini car wrecks. They're mini car crashes, and they're in it all day, every day. So that's one of the things. And the same thing goes with boxing. Boxing's really into when they spar hard. Now, they wear the headgear and they wear a little bit bigger glove, but they spar hard, which looks a lot like a fight. It looks a lot like a fight, and I don't agree with that. I think that you need to have partners that you can trust. I think you can wrestle at 100% and grapple at 100%, and you strike at about 80%. You take care of one another. You get exhausted. You get tired. You get your timing down. I also don't only say it because I did that, right? A lot of guys will just say whatever they did. Whatever they did is the right answer. I'm not that guy. But I do think in this regard, the gyms that I came through, I mean, look, if you show up and you don't have a mouthpiece, if you show up and you don't have the appropriate size gloves, if you show up and you don't have headgear, Clayton Hires will send you home. You are not getting on the mat that day. Oh, coach, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'll jump rope in the corner just to get to work. No. You're going home. You weren't responsible enough to bring your gear, but I'm a professional athlete. You're going home, period. You could be an 8-year-old kid or you could be fighting for a world championship. If you show up to Clayton's workout and you don't have the appropriate gear, you are going home. You're going home. I really think that's the way that needs to be. I think he was spot on with that. You show up with the appropriate gear. You Vaseline. You come out. Be an honest guy. You take care of your partners. You expect that they take care of you back. You work hard. You come in tomorrow. You do it again. You have a long life, a long career. I think that your head stays a lot safer as well. This is my opinion. This is a very sensitive topic you're asking me. But I've also seen guys that have done it the other way. I'll use Wanderlei Silva. He came out and spoke about this very openly. Forrest Griffin was another guy. Came out and spoke about this very openly. Forrest and Wanderlei used to spar at Randy Couture's gym. And people that would see it would say they would be in other rooms and they could hear these guys hitting each other. And it was so common that if they didn't even see who was in the ring, if they heard pop, 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 they would just, oh, Forrest and Wanderlei must be sparring. It was that hard. They would knock each other down, get up, and then finish the round. The other get knocked the other one down. They get up and go do another round. And they both have looked back and said, we should have done it that way. We thought we got a tougher chin. We thought we became tougher the harder and more shots that we took. And I lived through that same time when you did think that. So I'm just offering a couple of guys that have provided some evidence, looked back at their own career and said, you know what, I wish I would have controlled that more. I wish I would have fought every single day. I wish I would have sparred. Oh, and by the way, I wish I would have sparred with appropriate gear. Oh, and by the way, I wish I would have sparred 2 to 3 times a week, not 5 and 6 times a week. I think that's good evidence. I think those are guys you should listen to.